All right, once again, howdy. And welcome to our September DSA program for the Division of Student Affairs. My name is Jared Jackson, and I am from the Department of Recreational Sports, and I am here on behalf of the staff development team for DSA to welcome you to our program. Usually for the month of September, we usually do the State of the Division on behalf of the Vice President, Dr. Pugh, but he wanted to do something a little different this time, so today we have from past to present, and he has brought some of his colleagues who have served here in his role as Vice President, Interim Vice President, and he's going to have a chance to introduce them here in a little bit. So we're excited to have all of them here today, joining us back here in Aggie Land for hopefully a great time this morning, learning from them and from Dr. Pugh as well. A couple of updates from the staff development team. First off, at the check-in table, we were giving out the bookmarks. This has all of your monthly programs for this semester listed on it, along with the VPSA's open house date that will be in December. So feel free, if you did not get one of those, they will be on the check-in table as you leave, so that you have the dates and the titles for all the presentations throughout this fall. And then also, for most of the people who chose to sit up front, there are pamphlets on behalf of the Division of Student Affairs that just talks about our division and the different things that are going on with it. So those are for you to take and to enjoy. And at this time, I am done talking, so that's my job for the month, yes. But I want to take this opportunity to welcome to the stage our current Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. Daniel J. Pugh.
Thanks, Jared. Howdy. Well, I hear there's traffic issues getting to campus this morning, so we'll expect several more of our colleagues coming in. This morning we have a very, very special treat for you. It's a rare occasion when we have a privilege to have multiple vice presidents of student affairs sharing a stage. We typically don't like to share the spotlight and the stage with one another, so it's even more of a rarity that you'd have all the past and present vice president of student affairs from the same institution on the same stage. And that was the opportunity we had, and it was our intention today. But unfortunately, I need to share with you all that Dr. Coldest is in the hospital. He very much wanted to be with us this morning, and I wish I could share more with you regarding his status, but we really don't have any additional details right now other than he entered the hospital on Monday and he remains there. Cindy's been in contact and communication with Mary Dell Coldest and has been relaying our wishes for him to get better. Sent some items over there to the hospital. He wasn't receiving guests yet either, but just wanted you all to know that he really desired to be here. We've been talking about this for a number of months, and it may have been the only thing we might have been able to draw him out of retirement to do. But you know, we may have that opportunity again in the future, hopefully. So at this time, if we could, I'd like to share a moment of silence so we might send our thoughts and our prayers to Dr. Coldest and to his family, that he recover quickly. And I'm sure Dr. Coldest also would like to remember or have us remember those fellow Texans of ours who are still recovering from Hurricane Harvey and trying to find relief in the coming days, months, and years. So thank you. Thank you. So if you would, I'm going to introduce some individuals and bring them to the stage. If you would hold your applause as they make their way up, that would be great. You feel free to whoop all you want. That's always allowable. So the first individual to introduce is Dr. J. Malin Sutherland. Served as Vice President of Student Affairs at Texas A&M University from 1993 to 2003. Oh, yeah. Next. Dr. Bill Kibler, he served as Interim Vice President of Student Affairs, Texas A&M University 2003, and he's the current President of Sul Ross State University. Dr. Dean Bresciani, Vice President of Student Affairs, Texas A&M University 2004 to 2008, current President of North Dakota State University. Let him loose. There you go. Dr. David W. Parrott, Interim Vice President, Student Affairs, 2008, current VPSA, University of Florida. There you go. Welcome home, Dave. Lt.Gen.General Joseph Weber, Vice President, Student Affairs, 2008, 2014. thought I'd get a little raucous with the Marine in the house. Last but not least, Mr. Tom Reber, Interim Vice President, Student Affairs 2014-2015. Louder, he's the money guy. There you go. Yeah. They're pandering, by the way. That's all it is. Now we can give them a round of applause, please. So before we begin, I'd also like to take a moment to thank President Young, who's here with us for a brief amount of time this morning. He was with us last night at Silver Taps. This morning, as we had the panel in the green room, and thank you for your time, Mr. President. Appreciate you being here. Also like to point out an individual here on the front row to your right, Dr. Kevin Jackson from Baylor University, Vice President, Student Affairs. It's a lot of VPs in this room, by the way. It's a dangerous thing sometimes. But, and then finally my wife as well, Denise Pugh. So as promoted, we impaneled this group of former VPSAs and solicited questions from you all. So all across the division. We had many outstanding submissions, and my hope and our hope is to get through as many of those as we possibly can. So without further ado, and why did we give each of them a microphone, by the way? That's a really dangerous scenario.
Do these work?
Yeah, they do, man. So this ought to be a lot of fun here. So, no, thank you all for being here. It's really good. So let's start out with a question for each of you all. And we can go, we'll start with you, Malin, and we'll work down at first, and then we'll change up some orders as we go. But each of you is known for having been a student-centered vice president of student affairs. What did that term mean to you while you were in that role?
The first thing you need to know is I have the correct cardiologist, and the rest of these people do not. My cardiologist says, do not wear ties. Thank you very much. The answer to the question is, it's young people. If students are not first, then something is afoul. Of course, I would perceive that's true at all parts of the university, but it absolutely has to be true, from all of you. One of the things you need to remember about students is you do not know what they remember, but they do. And hopefully it's good, and the relationships that you have, sometimes you wonder about those, but yesterday a young man wanted me to meet his young wife, and he's part of the Alders family, which I think it's 9 or 10 of them have been here. The father was student body president, I think 85. Just an awesome, just an awesome family, and you want to keep the student in mind, period. The manner that we did that, Dr. Coldest did it, and I followed, is if a student wanted to see us, okay. They didn't have to give a reason. Patty was going to sign them up anyway for whatever time that turned out to be. Thank you. You're next.
I've been following you for years.
And I'm so happy.
Well, I would echo all of that and say, and even the foundational documents of our profession in student affairs talk about the preeminence of the mission of the institution, which sets the context. So that means what student affairs means and what it does on different university campuses can be very different. And it really is. I've had the chance to work for different institutions. We've got Dr. Jackson here who works at Baylor, which is a very different approach to a lot of things. But the common element, the common thread that runs through all of that is that students are first. The interest and the desires and the priorities and the passions or whatever of our students is what really should drive what we do. So student-centeredness means keeping them right in the center of all of the decisions we make, the openness that we have to make sure there's no way to stay, and I know we have other questions coming about how we keep up with how students are changing, but one of the ways you do that is your door is always open. So I have the unique privilege of being a president of an institution as dean is, but I carried forward that same concept in student affairs. Any student at my university can walk right through the door into the president's office and have a conversation with me, because it's the only way I keep in touch with what's really happening, going on, what students are caring about on our campus. And you all do that extremely well.
Well, I feel like there's nothing left to say, so I feel really bad for Tom down there.
Don't feel bad for Tom. I've got a lot to say.
Okay.
Tom has notes.
Oh, so things haven't changed much. I always felt responsible for the overall experiences of students at Texas A&M. And I always had to clarify that with faculty. That doesn't mean that I'm responsible for what happens in the class, and doesn't mean I'm responsible for what happens outside of the class in a direct way. But it's the one person at Texas A&M responsible for the overall experience of our students. That was a responsibility I felt, and to check to make sure that was being a high quality, good educational and personal development experience.
I would concur with everything that was said, and what I carry forward from my experience at Texas A&M that I like to use is that the Vice President for Student Affairs is the only Vice President that has student in their title. And we are expected to, and I enjoy being in the role of advocating for students, making sure that what we do has a focus on students. Policy, practice, whatever we do. Not only is it access, I think, and not only is it what they remember, but it's also how we approach what we do every day. Fortunately, at Texas A&M, we have this wonderful group of professional staff who we are our colleagues, who make sure that we keep the focus where it's supposed to be, and that's with the student, for the student, making sure that experience shapes them and impacts them, so that Vice President for Student Affairs title has a lot of meanings at multiple levels.
Well, I came from a background of, as many of you know, not formal student affairs training, but for 36 years, and that's probably what kept me in the Marine Corps, was the young men and women who joined, all from various backgrounds, all trying to figure out what do I want to do in my life, what's going on, all from some bad situations. They're looking for a family, a home, try to do things that you know they could achieve. And so it was kind of an easy transition to come to Texas A&M, because these students that come to this university are no different than those 17, 18-year-olds that join our military. They're all various backgrounds. They're trying to figure it out. A lot of them, their parents have figured it out for them, and they're not sure about that even. So they come here, and this is a family, and you basically out there become really their mentors and coaches to try to prepare them. And I know I drove my staff nuts, because I was the same way as these other gentlemen up here, is that, you know, a student walks in my office, I'm going to see Vice President of Student Affairs. Are you sure? And I said, yeah, he just told me to come in and see you. So, but I just felt like it was that important. I wasn't as good as Dr. Coldest, where I could remember all those names, but you know, it was a pleasure to do that. And I'll just end it by saying how important you were to me, the staff out here, in doing that. Is that, you know, these students, Texas A&M University or any college campus is not the real world. I'm just telling you, it's not the real world. And I love our academia and our professors and their subject matter experts. They're fantastic at what they do. But you out there, with your background and diversity that you have and have experienced some things too, I think really prepare these students for the real world, and not so much the technical aspect of it. So, and the time and attention you give them in support of the Vice President of Student Affairs was fantastic.
I would say we get in the profession because we love working with students, and the challenge as you move up, trying to find enough time to spend with students, as you have so many other administrative duties to deal with, and you kind of lose that reason you got in the profession. How do you keep those fires burning? And I think the other challenge is, as students change, are we flexible enough to change with them? Because we're here for a long periods of time. We like to do things the way we like to do it, and then we kind of look out the students and go, well, they're different. This student body's different than what we had before, but it's that student's experience. We owe it to those students for their experience here at the university, And that is the flexibility of us having the ability to change and deal with them so they have the same experience as others before them.
Tom, go ahead and keep on, and we'll work back down the line if you would. Someone submitted a question that asked, what was your proudest moment as Vice President of Student Affairs?
You can come up with a lot of individual
Hey,
situations.
Tom,
Are you starting
Tom.
on that end?
We're going to start down there and come back.
send me your cardiologist.
My answer is going to be better than yours.
Okay, go ahead then.
No, now I'm going to wait and show you.
He's going to trump you.
I mean, there was a lot of them. I served 15 years as an interim VP, and I would say, no, 15 years, it felt like years.
Okay.
I was paid in months, but it felt like years. 15 months, and I would say, I'm going to go really quick with two things. One, the division and the staff. Dr. Hernandez, Dr. Woods, Dr. Parrott, everybody sticking together, because we knew we had to get the division in the best shape we could for the next VP. And it was all the way from the office staff to the directors who are amazing in this division, and the staff in general. So just so proud of everybody, the way they picked up and helped me get through that time. But probably one of the biggest challenges I had is when Interim President Hussey asked me to lead the search for the next Reveille. If you think job searches are difficult, try that one. It's like a presidential search without having a search committee, search firm to help you out. So, but that was one thing I did that I knew would probably never happen again, once in a lifetime experience, kind of one of those Aggie things, and that was a great experience for me.
The
Yeah,
jury's
I
still
would
out on
wrap
your
all,
success.
yeah, I would wrap all mine up into, you have a student that you see gets in a little bit of trouble, struggles a little bit academically, does some things he or she shouldn't do, and then gets back on track. And you see them maybe later in their 4 years here, 5 years or 6 years, or out in life when they finally get out of this place. And I don't think you understand this better than I do, there's no greater feeling than to realize that maybe you had a little bit of influence on touching that student at the right time, to see that student turn around and really make something of himself or herself. And to me, that was the greatest, you wrap all those students up, and it's kind of like Dr. Ann Reaver always used to remind me, she said, John Weber, I'm just going to tell you, the students here, even the bad ones, when they get in trouble, still say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, and no, sir. So it's great satisfaction.
Thank you, Joe.
I think for me, it was a time when there was not a lot of high-quality communication coming from above down to the vice president's office. And so spending a lot of time making sure that the division had as much information as I had as we set the stage for General Weber coming on board. And so a great deal of effort, and I took a great deal of pride in making sure that I was an honest broker of information, that the information was shared, and that staff had that information so they could adjust and get ready and get prepared. And that took a lot of work, and it was a unique experience for me, and I was glad to play that role.
I think that there's so many most memorables, but the one for me that has stuck to this day was Bob Gates going away, if you will. We were up in the top of Rudder Tower trying to keep him away from the windows because we didn't want him to see what was happening outside. And for those of you that knew Bob Gates, the 6 core values of Texas A&M aren't just nice words in a speech. That is the way he lives his life. And being with him as we walked down the back steps of the MSC, and he not realizing that 20 to 30,000 people from the university community had come up to the back step to say goodbye to him. It said to me that he was a unifying force for this university. He was embodiment of the Aggie spirit, and that'll be one I never forget.
I would say the single most significant accomplishment, which was one that I had worked on here for years, but finally came together the year I was serving as the interim VP, was the Aggie Code of Honor. Those of you that worked with me for a long time knew that I worked on that for years here. And we had ups and downs, and we had proponents and opponents and various other kinds of folks, but it all finally came together and we were able to put that in place. Dave played a role. As a matter of fact, Dave picked up the ball and carried it after I left. And I checked online just to be sure the Aggie Code of Honor was still going on here. I wasn't going to mention it if it wasn't, but it encapsulates those core values and the other things. And, you know, we'd had that statement for years about Aggies don't lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. But it always just been a statement. It meant something, but we didn't have anything underneath that, anything behind that about how we actually made that real on this campus. And so it was sort of a mission of mine, to the extent that I even did my dissertation on that work or whatever, to bring that together and actually create and launch the Aggie Code of Honor, which we did during the year I was serving as interim VP. Is probably that highlight moment for me during that time.
The highlight, that in the broad sense that you said, I'm going to say three things. One, the number one role of the vice president is to have Bill Kibler's, Wynn Rosser's, Jan Winifred's, Patty Kelly, Terry Pankratz, even Tom Reber, in spots where you know they are more capable than maybe they've had the opportunity to show. And so you let them have the ball and go with it. But on the broadest sense, you know, there are two tragedies that all of us relate to. And I'm speaking now, I took your question to mean everybody, you know, not necessarily a personal situation. Obviously, there was so many things to be in charge of, and not in charge, not the right word, but to have happen to help the young people. Early that morning, Ray Bowen, we were obviously on the field, said, we're not going to let class out. It would be perfectly natural to have done that, for instance. But these young people need some place to go. They need to relate to their prof. The probability is in those classes, they're going to talk about other things, and that's very important. The reaction of every single member of the university, but very specifically Student Affairs, what needs to be done, how can we do it, let's do it. That happened. 9/11 happened, you know, on a morning. When the second one went in, it was perfectly clear that there was also a lot to do. So you immediately have all the media outlets, like in the Information Center and Rudder, all tune in. The Student Counseling Service started walking outside anywhere they could walk, looking for individuals that had some sign of difficulty. That's the way that you react. And when you do it without anybody having to tell you to do it, it is so rewarding.
So, you know, let me follow up, and for anybody that would care to jump in whichever order, none of you all talked about buildings or legacy projects in that answer. Why is that?
My
Students are our
two were
buildings.
killed when I announced that I was going to resign.
The development of students is always more important than building a building. And so that's why when the context of your questions bring us to that. And we all had projects and things that we worked on or championed or whatever. And the one that I championed during my year as interim VP didn't happen either. And so I don't know if it still happened. You know, we were trying to build a new band hall. Have we built a new band hall yet?
Breaking Ground Friday.
Glory, hallelujah. You know, that was my number one fundraising and building project, and it didn't happen. So
Only 13 years, 15 years late, but
you're waiting on money from Sol Ross to build your band hall? Right, it's not going to happen.
well, I do think it's quite a statement. I think a lot of people think that you look at the construction projects and the core dorms or the White Creeks and the music activity centers or the MSC. In reality, that's not generally what that's about. When we think about it, at the end of the day, it's about the development of those individual students, and are we doing that? And so the relationships are far more important than the structures we ever leave behind. So thank you all we didn't plan that, by the way. It just became pretty evident as we moved down that line, and Malin, you didn't disappoint either, so that's a good piece for us. So someone submitted a question as well. Reflecting back on your time as Vice President of Student Affairs, what do you believe has made Texas A&M's Division of Student Affairs a model for other divisions across the country? And why don't we start with Dean in the middle, and we'll work down and around.
Well, I always find questions like that dangerous, because I think when you start thinking of yourself as the best is when you quit being the best. You should always be looking for how to become the best. But that said, the Division of Student Affairs here has remained increasingly, or it's become increasingly unique in the sense of the comprehensiveness of the division. And I think that's based on the exceptional educational preparation and experience that the professionals in the various functional areas bring to their jobs, and that they have remained focused on the fundamentals of running the university and taking care of students versus getting lured into, and I always get in trouble when I get on this topic, what have become the more typical student affairs divisions are increasingly focused on political and social issues. Now, don't get me wrong, those are absolutely important. There's no football team that doesn't practice for the big plays, but the team that doesn't practice the fundamentals never gets a chance to do the big plays. And this is a division, I think, that has remained true to those fundamentals, which positions it to have an impact on the bigger situations.
Dave?
I think one of the things that was so impressed me when I interviewed at Texas A&M and then throughout my experience here that I've also noticed at my current institution, University of Florida, is just the level of talent, the passion and the commitment throughout the division from those talented people as we go to have that effect we want to have on students. Those of you who know me know I'm originally from Kentucky, so the illustration I use often when I think about the talent at Texas A&M that I experienced throughout my time here, and very similar to my current time at University of Florida, is there are lots and lots of thoroughbreds here. And one of the things you learn in horse racing is you get criticized if you don't let your thoroughbreds run, if you don't turn them loose to do what they do. And one of the great things I noticed when I came here and Malin hired me was how all these talented people had the autonomy within a framework, but autonomy to do what they do and do it well. And there was a lot of trust among those folks, and a lot of belief in each other, and a lot of passion and commitment for those students. And all that came together constantly to create this wonderful experience. And I look for that at University of Florida when I interviewed, and I look for that as we hire people, hiring people who are talented, who have passion, who are committed, and like that autonomy within a framework. And that continues to impress me about Texas A&M University.
Yeah, I think this division is so fortunate and because of, you are so well resourced. Now, you may not believe that, but compared to other universities, this Division of Student Affairs is very well resourced. And sometimes when you're that well resourced, you tend to forget where you came from. And man, we got all this great stuff going, and the money's flowing, and we're getting to do what we want and all these things, and we're getting recognition, but you got to always go back to remember where you came from. And I think this division is, through the leadership that it's had in the past, is not, well, stop just a minute. We are well resourced. Yeah, we're one of the best, and everybody looks at us and we're a model, but we haven't come back, we haven't forgot where we came from. And I think that humility is really necessary. And the comment was made, students come and they change all the time. Well, I think that's true, but that doesn't mean that we want to change to be like the students to give them what they want. No, the students change all the time, but you have the ability to change the way you deal with them and the tools you use and the way you react with different type of students to achieve the same things, maintain those core values, and get them ready to go out in the real world. Even though they change, certain things don't change. And you've done very well at adapting to that, and I think that's made you one of the better student affairs in the country.
I think the day I walked on this campus, I was amazed at the student support and passion for student affairs. Now, I think because of that, as a staff member, you're able to take that energy because you have students out there that you know, if you give them a reasonable request for a need that you have, the students will rally behind that and support that. And it makes it so much easier to wake up every morning and go to work knowing you don't have students writing letters against your division, complaining about the way you're providing service, because they've been so supportive. But also that has to do with the great work of the staff. It's a two-way street. Great students, very supportive, very energetic and passionate staff, and I think makes a great division of student affairs.
Anyone?
I liked all their answers.
You're not going to hear that very often. Brief. Anything, Bill?
Danny and I knew each other for several years before he got hired to be the VP here. He was at Arkansas, I was at Mississippi State, and we met a time or two a year or whatever. So I remember when I learned that you'd been hired as the vice president, I sent you a long email, if you'll recall, to explain to him why he had just become the leader of the best division of student affairs in the country. And then I explained why. I don't know if you remember that email. And I even named a few names of some of you all that were in here. But I agree with Dean. You always have to be careful when you talk about best. But, you know, I'm also a little bit of a student of history, and this division not only is exceptional, one of the best for sure, also very unique because of the mission and context of this institution, but also unique based on its history because it was so unusual. For the first 30 years that this division even existed, it only had 2 leaders. Dr. Coldest served as the head of this division for 20 years. He left his stamp not only on this division, this institution, but on many, those of you that are over a certain age, many of you that worked with him, but his legacy is still here. So many things that he set the tone for and sent ambassadors all over the country that were influenced by that. Some of y'all remember Jay Lemons, who just stepped down as 16 years as the president of Susquehanna University. I was with Jay not very long ago, and he talked about continuing to do some of the things as the president of that institution with students that he learned from Dr. Coldest. Well, after that 30 years was over, 20 with John and 10 with Malin, then we became a more typical student affairs division in terms of the turnover of leadership and those things. Didn't make this division any less in terms of its quality, but just made it more typical because you didn't find another student affairs division in the country that only had 2 leaders in 30 years. That was very unusual. I go to Mississippi State. I served as the vice president there for 10 years. I think after only 3, I was the senior vice president at that institution. That's the nature of the turnover that happens at those institutions. So my division, while I was there, benefited from stable leadership for 10 years and then passed it on to someone else. This division benefited enormously from 30 years of stable leadership, insightful leadership, and then all the things everybody else said. We had extraordinary talent and staff. But the other thing I would say that makes this division so unique is the nature of Texas A&M University and what happens at this institution in terms of the roles, the leadership, the responsibility that students assume that is very unique. In the 24 years I worked here, I'd get calls from colleagues periodically that, oh, I want to talk about this thing that happens at Texas A&M University and how you all do that. And I'd get through 10 or 15 minutes of explaining that to, well, I don't think we can do that on our campus because we don't have students that can lead that at that level. Y'all know what they are, things that with this student-staff partnership we have here that allow the staff, for the most part, to just sort of set the boundaries and turn the students loose to actually run those things. I was so impressed at Silver Taps last night because long ago it wasn't so much that much. That was really run by the students, which is the way that was supposed to be. And you know the list, I don't have to give that to you, of the huge enterprises that you have here at Texas A&M that are led, run, conceived, even changed through time by student leadership, guided and mentored by you all. But that's one of the things that makes this perhaps one of the most unique divisions of student affairs in the country as well.
Oh, thank you all. I want to emphasize that as well. I recall when I was at the University of Georgia and we sent a team down here to take a look at fish camp and to model that and take it to Georgia. What we failed to do was to implement it the way that it was run and operated here. When I was at Arkansas, we did the same thing with our rock camp and really staff run, staff led, student employed in those areas. So the concept was the same, but the implementation was very different in that framework. And there aren't many institutions that are patient enough to allow that to occur, because with that comes a lot of risk and a lot of tragedy on occasion. And this university's experienced both of those at various points in times. The other piece that jumps out at me as I look around the room here as well is, and when you talk about the quality and the breadth of the staff that exists here, the leaders that are in here within your profession. When I was at Georgia, we hosted the ASJ website and got to work with Bill Bracewell, who's one of the 7 founders, and our partners in all that crime were Texas A&M in the development of that group. And I think we all got to sort of come up in some of those same entities together. Look across the room here as well. We've got people that are out there, the president of boards of AHEAD and other American Bandmasters Association, and that's a testament, I think, to the quality of the personnel that are here. But boy, short of nothing, I'd say at Arkansas, I loved employing Aggies. And whether it was, Rob Stagney, who's there as the director of the union now, or when Becky Howard came on board, some of you probably remember Becky in her day here, it was really that sort of quality. So I think that really helps it stand out. Dave, you talked about passion. And so one of the questions that came in asked about, how do you continue to find passion for the work you do in the face of the adversity, the tragedy, the politics, because there's no politics in what you do whatsoever, and the other forces that exist at A&M. You can go into Florida stuff too, because I'm sure you have politics there, that provide challenge in fulfilling the mission of the division supporting students' development. So how do you keep that passion? Where do you find it? Well, we can go down. Let Dave start and we'll go.
I guess for me, I keep separate who I am and what I do. I have 2 sons. They're 11 and 12 years old, and I spend a lot of time with them, not near as much as I would like, but a lot. And that's who I am. I'm their father, and I'm a parent, and I'm a coach, and I like to fish, and that's who I am. What I do, I like to do very, very well, and I take great pride in doing what I do very, very well. So I look to people like her up here who are colleagues, who model for me. I reach out and touch base with colleagues. I try to make sure that every morning I start out with about 5 minutes of just quiet time and count my blessings personally and professionally. Sometimes it's a matter of putting everything in perspective. The fact that we had a couple of lawyers that are upset and some parents that are upset can really weigh on you until you put in perspective that, you know what? 55,000 students at my current institution. 55,000 students are pretty happy today. Let's not worry about the 2 attorneys and the 2 parents. Okay, that's put that in perspective. So for me, it's a rare opportunity. I have an opportunity to do something that I have a great deal of. I take a great deal of pride in. I do have some passion for, a great deal of passion. To be given that opportunity every day is really a blessing in itself. There's no guarantee. One of the great things I've heard many colleagues say, being a vice president for student affairs in particular, there's multiple opportunities every day to make a career-ending decision, okay? So, and we live with that. That's part of what we do. So I want to make sure that when I come in the morning, that one of the things I remember is all the great things that happened the day before and the week before and the month before, all the great people and all the great students. And today may be the last day that I do that, because we don't control that for, at a variety of levels. The president can walk in at any time and say, hey, we're going in a different direction, or some landmine can blow up and end it, or whatever may happen. So keep it in perspective, making sure that who I am and what I do, I keep separate, and then recognizing that working anywhere in student affairs, but particularly as vice president, to be able to lead a wonderful group of people is a treasure. And it's something that's a rare opportunity, and I get to steward that for a short period of time. So that's how I view it.
Joe?
Yeah, I was always concerned about the staff, and that, you are under a lot of pressure. I don't care what anybody says. And you do work long hours. And my deal was, you can't take care of these students if you don't have your own life in good order. And you got to get up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and like what you see. And so I just always felt like we got to make sure the staff knows that in order to maintain their passion for these students, they got to have a passion for themselves and their own families. And so if that was important to me, and I just think that you got to be, you'll get burned out. I'm telling you, this is great. We will burn you out. And at the same time, we got to realize that if you're in good shape with yourself, you're going to maintain that passion with the students.
You know, I would say we need to continue to celebrate our success. I think so many times, and all of you people doing programs know, you work so hard on something, it's over, you assess it, you wrap it up, you put it away, and you go on to the next thing. And we don't even talk about the great things. But the negative things, you know, those are the things we seem to spend a lot of time on and dwell on, and we forget all the great things you all accomplished. And that's unfortunate. And I'll give an example. Residence Life moves in 12,500 students onto campus, into rooms. It could go perfect, but it just takes one email to the chancellor, to the vice president, from an upset parent, and that's what we spend all our time on. And we don't spend the time with the staff saying 99.9% was perfect. Thank you, congratulations. And that's what we need to do a better job on, and I personally need to do a better job on.
Maven?
Yes. What hit me of the original question is politics. My perception was, with the staff that I had, we really tried and accepted that the politics was at our level. Part of our job was to not have it, if possible, to affect at the director level and therefore you. You know, there's all manner of things that are going on all the time. So you just have to keep them in perspective and leave you with the opportunity to do what you do.
I couldn't give a better answer than Dave Parrott gave. That was perfect, because that's exactly the way I believe too. I've been telling younger staff for years this idea that who you are is different than what you do. I remember when I first came to A&M, I was young. I don't remember what I was, about 24 years old, 25. And I was a student conduct officer for this university, and that was my full-time job and my only job. And so you talk about the potential for burnout, because that's all I did every day, all day long. I had the Corps of Cadets conduct as well. And so I'm young, and I'm kicking students out of school. I'm arguing with lawyers. I'm doing all these things. I'm having people nearly every day telling me how unhappy they are with me. And that can wear you down, but some of you that have been around here long enough remember me telling the story. I had my office. That's why it was cool to be in the YMCA building last night. That's where my office was for the first many years I was here. Set up where when I sat at my desk doing these hearings, I had my credenza and a picture of my son where I could look at it, that picture over the shoulder of whoever I was talking to. And I'm thinking, you're telling me what a sorry, no good, whatever are, but I'm looking at this young guy who thinks I'm the greatest thing in the world. So therefore, I don't really care what you think. And it sustained me at that time. And, you know, some of you know, I got 6 children, and we had foster children, all of this stuff. That's the world. That's what makes the world go around. That's the passion that's there, and also the passion in those students that you meet with every single day. The politics are real. One other little brief story. I left Mississippi State after 10 years, I remember, and went to Sul Ross, and I don't know, a month or two later, my assistant VP became the interim while they were still trying to find a VP there. And he sent me what he called his thank you email. And I said, what's that about? And it's like, because I didn't realize all the crap you put up with and protected us from in the division every day that we never knew about until now I'm sitting in your chair. But I think that's part of the role when you're the leader of that area, is you do take on some of that, the political stuff, the other kinds of things, so that folks like you can do your job every day and do the things that you need to be doing with students and not be overly burdened about some of the stuff that's happening over which we have no control anyway.
It goes without saying that higher education, particularly public higher education, has become increasingly politicized. And frankly, at times it becomes a cesspool that you can be sucked into. And because of social media and other ways of learning things, we all find out too much about things that really don't matter. There's somebody at the university that is paid to mire in that, and it's the poor suckers that have the title president. And it's the other duties as assigned in the job description. Focus on your job, no matter what level of individual you are at a university, faculty, student affairs, staff. Focus on your job and let the people whose job it is to worry about the politics do that. And that doesn't mean that you're going to see things that you agree with. It oftentimes means you're going to see things you disagree with. But focus on your job, and you will be a better, happier professional in person, and leave the politics to the people that's their job.
Just one other thing is, my philosophy was, don't worry about things you don't have any control over. Just don't worry about them. And I think if you do that, you'll go on and do great things. Just keep thinking about that.
So Dean, you'd mentioned the presidency there when you were commenting, and someone sent a question specifically for you and Bill with regards to your role as president. And they said, as sitting presidents, does your background in student affairs influence your approach to institutional leadership, and how?
Well, absolutely, and frankly, student affairs people are the only people crazy enough to even think about being a president. Long hours, low pay, constant conflict. Now, don't hear me wrong. I wouldn't recommend the job to most people. It's not for people that are sane of mind. And I think anybody that's president would confirm that. But there isn't a day that my student affairs background doesn't make me a better president, because it taught me that the little things do matter, and individuals do matter, and that to be successful, you need to pay attention to what you're hearing and seeing from your faculty, staff, students, people visiting the campus, alumni. Everyone matters. Now, you can't, as Dave points out, you can't get wrapped up in the less than 1%, or you'll quickly come to a standstill. But if you take all that together, you will be a better practicing professional. One of the little things I do, I sometimes friend people that have radically different political opinions than me, not because I'm intrigued to see what they have to say, but because I'm intrigued what they have to say. And I know that sounds conflicted, but I want to know what their perspective is against my perspective, so that I can take a position somewhere in the middle that understands both ends of that spectrum.
I remember talking to my mother, who's now 88 years old, when I got this job at Sul Ross, and say, I've finally arrived. I now have a job where I live in government housing and beg for money. So, what more can you say? But I've told every student affairs colleague I know around the country that's asked that actually a career in student affairs is great preparation to be a university president, because it prepares you in unique ways for the realities of that job that going other routes actually don't prepare you for, even though it's still a very small percentage of university presidents have a background in student affairs. But we grow up in the world of the fact that you can come to work every day having no idea what that day is going to bring, or you think you have a plan and then you laugh about that plan at the end of the day because that's not what the day was. And the fact that students, faculty, and others, supporters, alums, or whatever, it broadens your perspective, but it's the same kind of work, I think, in terms of that. But it prepares you uniquely for that. You learn not to panic if you have a career in student affairs when crisis happens or complaints come or whatever, but rather just roll off those, but also the ability to put relationships first. You know, when I came as a new president, Dean may have done the same thing, and one of my highest priorities was to spend however long it took touring that entire campus, going to every college, meeting every single faculty member in their locations, and let them show me what they do and what they're proud of and all those things. So you really began to build those relationships, and that would just seem natural to me, but I was told, good Lord, no president's done this. We don't even remember if anybody's ever done this in the history of this institution. Yet, coming from student affairs, you realize the relationships and getting to know the people so you really understand who you're working with is just natural to us, and so therefore it worked very well. So,
Thank you all.
There was an old saying in management circles, that I think still is probably alive if you use it effectively. Management by walking around. Listening, saying hello, saying thank you at every level as often as is possible to do it.
So for our interims that are on the panel, that role can often be interesting as you inherit that. The question was, what was your strategy? So Tom, you talked about it earlier, but what was your strategy for making sure we were moving ahead as a division while still respecting that someone else was slated to take the reins in the near future as VPSA? And so that's for the three interims that were here. What was the strategy you employed?
I guess since I'm the oldest one, I should answer it first, right? Well, a couple of things. I knew when I became the interim that I was going to be doing that at least a year, and it was 13 months, so it wasn't a real short period. So there were several important priorities, I think, one of which was to continue to move the division forward. We had various strategic initiatives and things that were already on the plate that, as Malin as the leader, we had set forth, and so to make sure we didn't coast during that year, that we continued to move aggressively forward. The second big thing, because that was a time of transition, we had folks leaving, other kinds of changes, so it was very important to have good leadership in the right places, but also not put that in a place where I didn't set Dean up either for success or failure, but really set that up. So two of these guys, Tom Reber and Dave Parrott, I brought into the VP's office, but in interim roles, because they were providing great leadership in the division already. They were the right people for those right places, but put them in interim leadership roles. So Dean had the opportunity to come in as a new vice president with a very strong team, but also in a position where he could change it, morph it, do whatever he wanted to at the time. And I think the record shows that worked very well at the time.
I would concur with Bill. I think it's a time of transition, and I mentioned earlier about being an honest broker of information and getting people to raise their eyes up and look further down the road than just at the time of transition, so that we can begin to set the stage for what's happening down the road with students, rather than focus on just the transition that's going on. We didn't want to ignore the transition. That was important, but we didn't want that to be our only focus. And so for me, the strategy was, how do you move people into problem-solving mode instead of just focusing on the fact that we're experiencing this transition? And then how do we make sure that, we had a lot of efforts at the top of the organization in terms of communication, but the communication wasn't always as clear, perhaps, as we wanted to be, or wasn't always as timely as we wanted to be, through no fault of anybody's in particular. And so making sure that again, people had an honest view of what the communication was, where the university was moving, and how student affairs fit into that, and then thinking about how we just keep moving forward all the time. And that was really two basic strategies I had.
When Dr. Hussey, who was the interim president at the time, talked to me about serving in the role as interim VP for Student Affairs, the very first question I asked him is, can I make decisions as a VP, or is it a position you just want me to keep things afloat until the position gets filled? Because that was important to me. I think it was important for the division to move forward and to get the place ready for the next VP. And he said, no, I want you to act as a VP and make decisions as a VP would. And during that time, through Dr. Hernandez's leadership and her team, did a 5-year strategic plan. And most divisions wouldn't have done that with a vacant VP position. It would have made sense to say, why change everything, possibility of change everything, let's just leave it status quo until the next person comes. I was originally told 7-month appointment, ended up being 15. So obviously glad we went forward. For those of you that were here, we had some severe challenges in regards to PwC, lost 25 positions in one day. So how do you tell the next incoming VP you've got a mess on your hands, and how are you going to handle it? So that was our role, and our leadership roles with our team, is to get positions back and get things back in better shape than when we got it. And I think for the most part, it was to let Dr. Pugh come in and be able to work from day one instead of fix 15 months worth of worth of issues.
And you will get
As
that.
interim VP in the fall of
And
'93.
he was interim, by the way.
When John Coldest retired in August, the key thing, I think, that I had to make sure that, one, we were going to be as accessible as students knew that we were then. Obviously, you have all the same programming, things essentially keep moving, but I wanted to try to make it clear that we were going to be as open and accessible a place as we had been for 20 years.
So for those that served as the sitting VPs, a question came in for that group, and others can jump in there as well. But what was the greatest challenge you faced during your time, and what did you learn from that experience?
I think the greatest challenge for me, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, was trying to fight for and maintain all those things we talked about that you don't know about, the politics of the job with the academic side of the house. And, you can, you just get it out there. There is that fine line, and sometimes we cross it, they cross it, and there is a little bit of tension and friction there at times. But that was a challenge because that's something that has to be looked at and dealt with every day. And I got to tell you, my deal was, with respect to student affairs, if you don't have a seat at the table, you ain't there. And so I always wanted to make sure we had a seat at the table with the right people and dealing with our colleagues over in the academic side. So, it would increase that cooperation, but let them know and understand that we are truly relevant and equally as relevant as they are in what we do in shaping these students and get them ready for the future. So, but that was a challenge, and many things occurred that y'all don't know about, you don't need to know about, but I think every one of these gentlemen up here fought for you in that same way.
I think following up on the same notion, when I came to Texas A&M, there was considerable antagonism toward the Division of Student Affairs. In some sense, rightly or wrongly, it had become the university's experience for its students. And faculty were very, very troubled by that. And reestablishing that relationship as one that's collaborative and one that's supportive of the in and out of class experience was very important at the time. And in the ultimate success of the Division of Student Affairs, and it's staying not only relevant to Texas A&M's success, but seen as an asset versus a detraction.
Based on the question, I probably pretty obviously have to say that the bonfire tragedy was easily the most consuming mission that many of us had. Everyone in my office, there was a lot to do. There was a lot to do for a really long time. If Bill Kibler, I said him before, Jan Winifred, Patty, Wynn Rosser, if that quality of individual had not been there, it would have been extremely difficult. And of course, there was one other person that was the absolute key to the manner in which the recovery began to take place, and that was Dr. Ray Bowen, who was the president. He had to have been there. There were two essential things that really set things in motion in a better way. At about 7 a.m. that morning, the student body president, Will Hurd, the congressman, the MSC president, and I think there was another student, I apologize for not remembering, they had a man by the name of Steve Hodge who ran all of the facilities, including the Reed Arena, with them. And they said, we want to have a memorial tonight. Okay. Look at Steve. Is it possible? If you say do it, we will do it. Do it. A significant message, is sent, by that by that kind of reaction. Then later that day, I'm going to say it was pretty close to noon, we're in Rudder Tower, we're in a conference room, and we're joined by all the lawyers. Anytime you have a tragedy like that, probably the first thing a lawyer's going to tell you is you cannot talk to anybody, you cannot discuss it, you have to shut it down because there's likely to be litigation. Ray Bowen said, no way. As a matter of fact, we're going to order every piece of paper that ever existed that has the word bonfire on it to Cushing Library, and it will be an open record. Huge decision that sets the tone and the pace as you move forward. And of course, the individual reactions of everyone were, were just fantastic and important.
I think it was even more significant than that. I was in that same meeting. I don't remember why I was invited to that meeting, but I was in that meeting.
Because I wanted you.
But the way I defined courage on the part of a university president was the other thing the lawyers said was, it's very important for us from a liability standpoint, is we have to hold these students out at arm's length.
Yeah.
We can't take responsibility for what they did. And Ray Bowen looked him right in the eye and said, that's wrong, because they are part of who we are. You can have your opinion about what Bonfire was, but you can't say Bonfire was not a part of Texas A&M University. And so we're going to own it. And so the answer to you, looking at about 3 or 4 lawyers in the eye, was, no, that's not the position we're going to take, and guess what? You get to defend us anyway. And so that was, in terms of courage, because I've had lots of head student affairs people and know lots more presidents now that I've been in this role, that was uniquely courageous in terms of the decision that he made. And it even gets to what Dean experienced when he first got here, because I think we all experienced it. Those of you that were here when Bonfire occurred, it's not just the piece about how tragic that was, that we lost 12 lives and all of the things that had happened. That was probably the most significant challenge in who the Division of Student Affairs were and its relationship with students on this campus in the history of our division. Because everything was being questioned as a result of that particular tragedy. This whole idea of the legacy of this institution putting students in leadership roles and decision-making roles that we had spent several years, I did many years here, defending in other settings, professional settings, that was the right thing to do. And so suddenly when you have this tragedy, all of that began to be questioned, even by our faculty and others. Was the Division of Student Affairs allowing the balance to be tipped in the wrong way toward vesting students with significant responsibilities that many would argue, oh no, those are the responsibilities the staff should have. And the students should sort of be behind the staff doing all the work, that's okay, but not being in front, actually making the decisions and literally being in charge, and the staff are the ones off to the side or behind, sort of keeping an eye on things. And I think it took a few years to settle that out, and one of the real tributes to the strength and the legacy of that kind of role with students here is that I think it survived that. Because lesser institutions that had less talented staff and less of a true tradition of that being the way to do it would have just allowed that to change everything here. And suddenly the students would have been the losers in terms of their ability to develop as leaders and decision makers and all of that in some of the various roles and positions that this institution continues to put students in. Every bit of that was questioned after the Bonfire tragedy, and many felt as though that should be changed, not slightly, but dramatically. So I think a lot of folks in here, and we were a part of some of that, but then it had to go on when Dean came and beyond that to say, no, that's the right way to work with students. Did a dramatic tragedy occur? Of course it did, and we can all learn from that, and we did. We found out in the student affairs, really higher education, in work with students anyway, the term that we all understand now is proactive risk management didn't even exist before Bonfire. Malin will remember that. You know, we did a national survey trying to figure out how everybody managed risk management. And they said, yeah, we buy lots of insurance. That was the answer we got from every institution. And so we said, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about proactive risk management. And the answer we got back from all of them is, as soon as you figure that out, you let us know, because we want to know how that works. And in fact, we did. And it began influencing institutions all across the country. Is it perfect now, here, or any place? No, it's not, but I think we're thinking about things differently. And a lot of that was driven by the experiences that came on this institution, because we had places all over the country looking at this place because of what happened, the nature of it, and what we learned from that, and how we implemented things differently here as a result of that. But I also questioned the very sort of the heart and soul of what we do in student affairs on this campus. That particular tragedy did, and I'm pleased to see, as best I can figure it out, we're still doing things the way we did them always.
Danny, let me go back. I want to make sure that we touch on the Ray Bowen decision and what an impact it has had through time. And I'm going to tie Kevin Jackson into a piece of this, but Malin and Bill were sharing with me that bonfire occurred before I arrived at Texas A&M, the bonfire collapse. And Bill and Malin were sharing with me in one of those hallway conversations you have occasionally about the Ray Bowen decision. And Bill said, and Malin nodded vigorously as Bill was describing, that Ray Bowen was talking about doing the right thing relative to this decision-making process and talking with the attorneys. And I shared that narrative multiple times with students when I met, because I thought it was compelling. And I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. I shared it in my law classes with students and so forth. So we go forward in time. They're telling me this in the 2002 time frame and talking about it. We go forward in time, it's 2008, and Kevin Jackson comes down with Fish Camp director and so forth. In my office, I'm the interim VP, and they have a decision to make. There's a hurricane that's going to cut off, if I remember correctly, the roadway between here and Fish Camp, and they either had to bring some folks back early or send some folks. I don't remember all the details, but it was going to be very costly, either decision they made, and all kinds of impacts. And right in the middle of that, we're talking, and a female student who was the director of Fish Camp looks up and she said, wait a minute. Dr. Parrott, remember when Ray Bowen said, do the right thing? Let's do the right thing. And they made the right decision. Years later, that leadership still came through with those students. It gave me goosebumps at the time. Kevin was sitting in my office when it happened. It was an amazing illustration of how a tough decision, providing leadership at one point in time, carries over later on, and it's part of the fabric of what Texas A&M is about. I think it's important.
I think we still experience that on some regular basis in the lower levels, but it certainly isn't something that goes without our attention on a regular basis, and there are several sitting in the rooms who've gone through that in the recent months, by the way. We're approaching our witching hour here. I have one other question I'd like to ask for each of you, and quite honestly, what does Texas A&M mean to you?
We don't have enough time, Malin.
I know.
Yeah, sure.
I was a really poor high school student and undergraduate student at Texas A&M. It was, there were two requirements for admission. You had to have graduated from high school, and you had to have been immunized. That was it.
And he had the first, by the way.
I had both of those. Over time, the mentoring that I received went into the service for a couple of years, which was good for me. Because Dean Hannigan and General Rudder knew me, they said, you can come back and take your mentor's job. Okay, well, a job sounds good since I'm changing my life. And you start, down the road. It has been the most fantastic experience that anybody can ever have. Some 400,000 or so students wandered through here during 36 years at Texas A&M. Many, not as many as you might think, but many still touch. And their kids come, and now I've got a freshman in White Creek that a high school friend is the grandfather. The connection of, we often use the word family that is not understood. I've had a family, and I'm so proud for it.
Well, I echo all of that. I'm very proud of this institution. You know, I wear an Aggie ring, very proudly. But I didn't go to school here as an undergraduate. I got my doctorate here.
Gator.
And then my, be careful, there's two of us here now. But my children gave me this ring as a Christmas present 10 years after I earned my doctorate, so I still wear it very proudly because it does impact that. When I left Texas A&M, I'd spent half my lifetime at this institution, and therefore it meant a lot to me then. It continues to mean a lot to me now, the experiences that I had here and all of the things that I learned at this institution, the friends and colleagues I've had through the years, and the many doors that being at Texas A&M opened for me. But it was the students. It was the opportunity to know, you know, Will Hurd, some of you that have been here long enough remember Will Hurd as student leader. He's my congressman now. And so he has to come to Sul Ross State University, and we open our doors and we let him hold his congressional forums on our campus. We're apolitical, but we let him do that as long as he's a sitting congressman. We don't let him campaign, but we let him do the other things. And so it's that full circle of all of those things that have made that difference and the uniqueness of that experience all those years at Texas A&M has influenced so many people's lives in so many different ways, and I am certainly one of them.
Thank you.
I think very concisely, the value and impact of tradition at Texas A&M on the positive side of the coin allows it to act and feel like a much smaller institution. When I was here, we were 45,000 students. I understand now over 65,000 students. The culture here defies the size and scope of the university. But at the same time, Texas A&M also represents an ability to not be shackled by tradition. There are a lot of bad traditions in higher education. There's a lot of bad traditions in society. And I think over the decades, Texas A&M has become better and better at evaluating what's a good tradition and what's one that perhaps is no longer appropriate, and making changes to accommodate that. But again, going back to the central part, the importance and value of tradition, if it's a good tradition.
I think a couple of things for me. Bill kind of mentioned quickly that he's a Florida Gator. I'm currently in the part of the Gator Nation. I'm also part of the Aggie experience. And what this experience taught me, my greatest strength on Strength Quest is context, by the way, okay? And what Texas A&M does for all of us and for the students is they put in context what this experience is about. So it isn't just that the students have an experience, and it isn't just that they benefit from that experience, but they have an understanding of why that experience exists, the history of it, and that's so important, particularly if your top strength is context. That's so important. And what I learned, how I use that moving forward when I went to the University of Florida, is I told my staff my top strength is Strength Quest is context. And so now every time somebody wants to do something, let me tell you the history of this and how we got there, okay? Let me give you all the background on this. And that's very helpful to me, but that's what we do here in the Aggie Nation, is we make sure that context, that history of Texas A&M and being an Aggie, is always in the forefront of our thinking, and we connect those students to that context. And I will always carry that with me. I think that's so important.
Thanks.
Well, Texas A&M got me on the right track. I mean, I'm a product of Catholic education and thought I wanted to be a priest, and I lasted 5 months in the seminary, was kicked out and said, son, you need to go to Texas A&M. And I did, and I went there and I met my wife and have a great family and all that, and it was wonderful. But as you get to my age, it's not so much important what Texas A&M meant to me. To me, it's more important, what does Texas A&M mean to our state and our country and the world, particularly what situation we find ourselves in today. I remember on a hot, steamy afternoon as a young freshman being marched into Guyon Hall and sitting there and General Rudder coming out and talking to the fish class and saying, I want to be very clear now, y'all are students here at Texas A&M University, and your job is to listen and to learn and respond and react, and And we're the teachers and the mentors and the coaches, and the whole gist of this, and he said, is you're going to learn a little bit about the world before you go out and start trying to change it. And that was pretty raw, pretty rough, pretty clear. But when you look at today, the students that graduate from this university, it's a very challenging world out there, but it's very dangerous. At the same time, it's very exciting, and they shouldn't be afraid to get out there. And so my charge to you is just, it's so important to the nation and the world right now that these students are ready to go out there and not just survive, but change the world and make it a better place, because there is an awful lot to be done out there right now, and you play such an important role in that.
I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. My favorite color is orange. So I was welcomed with open arms when I came to Texas A&M. I do want to thank Dennis Corrington for hiring me in 22 great years of the Department of Recreational Sports. When you talk about what does A&M mean to me, on the first of each month, I get a check. My wife gets a check. My son gets a check. And my daughter, who works also for athletics, gets a check. So if A&M ever goes under, the Reber family is seriously in trouble. Why have I stayed here 35 years? Probably because nobody else would hire me, but that's all right. That's all right. A&M is just, it's been wonderful for our family. And think about working in the same department as your spouse. So I spend all day at work, and Ann spends all day at work, and then we go home. And the rule is, right, we're not going to talk about work, right? Oh yeah, that goes over real well, lasts about 15 seconds. Then we spend the whole night talking about work and then coming back the next day. So, but thank Dr. Pugh for his support. And for this group up here, you can just tell by the passion they have for what they do. All great mentors, all great friends, and make working at A&M very, very special. And they have been through some, it's easy to look at the great times, but there's some very difficult and challenging times, which made A&M and Student Affairs a better place. And actually made us, I think, all grow as professionals to be able to work in those situations.
Well, on behalf of the entire division, those that are here and those that aren't able to join us this morning, I want to say thank you for joining us today. I know we have some other activities through the day, culminating with hopefully a meal that everyone's at this evening. And so if you would, please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Have any good photos? So for those that are interested, we're going to give the panel a quick break, and then we're going to go outside. And if you would like to have a photograph with the panel, you're welcome to do so. And so we've got a photographer out there, and we'll get everybody through there very quick. But we thought it might be an opportunity. I saw photos up there, but if you'd like to be able to do that, we sure would appreciate you joining us. Thank you.